You've probably been told at some point that you're not that smart. Maybe a teacher said it, maybe someone you respected implied it. Maybe no one said it out loud, but the message landed anyway, and part of you has quietly carried it ever since. But here's what neuroscience has found. The most consistent markers of high intelligence look nothing like what we imagine intelligence to look like. They don't look like confidence or quick answers, they look like anxiety, distraction, sensitivity. The exact traits that got you labeled as too much. The mind that looks broken from the outside is often the one working hardest on the inside. And the people who carry these traits the longest are usually the last ones to understand what they actually mean. By the end of this video you will. Let us start with something small. Picture yourself walking home after a conversation that ended an hour ago. Everyone else has moved on. But you're still there, mentally replaying it, turning it over, noticing the slight pause before someone answered. The word they chose instead of the one you expected. You're not being paranoid. You're doing something most brains simply don't do naturally. Most people experience a moment and move on. You experience a moment and then study it. Psychologists call this metacognition, the ability to think about your own thinking. And research consistently links it to higher cognitive function. Most people make a decision and move forward. You make a decision and then spend 3 days silently reviewing it, looking for what you missed. Your brain isn't just reacting to the world, it's watching itself think. That's not a flaw in your wiring. That's one of the most sophisticated things a human mind can do, and this is where things get interesting. That self-doubt you carry, the persistent whisper asking whether you really know what you're talking about. Whether you're missing something obvious that everyone else already understands, that feeling isn't a sign of low intelligence. It's almost the opposite. There's a well-documented psychological pattern called the Dunning-Kruger effect. People who understand a subject at a surface level tend to feel completely certain. Because they can yet see the edges of what they're missing. The less someone knows, the more confident they sound. The more someone knows, the more questions they carry. Your uncertainty isn't weakness. It's the first sign of real comprehension. The most knowledgeable people in any field aren't the ones who speak with the loudest confidence. They're the ones who keep asking questions long after everyone else has stopped. But here's the part most people misunderstand. You talk to yourself, not out loud in public but quietly under your breath, narrating your thinking as you work through a problem. Most people treat this as a quirk or a mild embarrassment. Science treats it as something else entirely. When you externalize your thoughts through language, you give your working memory a structure to hold onto. You slow the internal noise down enough to actually sort through it. Language isn't just how you communicate with others. For some minds, it's how they communicate with themselves. Research in cognitive psychology shows that inner speech is strongly associated with self-regulation. Problem-solving and analytical reasoning. Einstein reportedly thought through problems by narrating them to himself. So did a long list of people history eventually decided were remarkable. You're not eccentric for doing this. You're processing at a level that requires more scaffolding than silence can provide. Now consider the way you experience your environment. You're sitting in a meeting room, everyone else seems comfortable. But you noticed the low hum of the air conditioner the moment you walked in. You noticed when someone's posture shifted slightly before they said anything. You noticed the tension between two people who were both pretending everything was fine before a single word was exchanged. You've probably been told you're too sensitive, that you notice things that don't matter, that you should stop reading into everything. Sensitivity isn't a weakness, it's a wider antenna picking up signals others never even receive. What's actually happening is a higher degree of sensory and social processing. Your nervous system is taking in more data per second than most people. The upside is pattern recognition that's difficult to teach. The downside is that loud, chaotic environments don't just feel inconvenient, they feel genuinely exhausting. in a way that's hard to explain to someone whose system doesn't work the same way. You're not oversensitive. You're running a more detailed scan of the world than most people ever do. There's one more trait worth naming carefully. The one that surprises people most. You feel things deeply, not just your own emotions but other people's. You absorb the mood of a room. You feel the weight of someone's disappointment even when they insist they're fine. You leave certain conversations carrying something that wasn't yours to begin with. Most people assume emotional sensitivity exists on a completely separate track from intelligence, something softer, less analytical, but the neuroscience doesn't support that clean division. The brain doesn't separate feeling from thinking. In complex minds, they run on the same engine. Emotional depth and cognitive complexity tend to coexist in the same architecture. The brain that holds multiple ideas simultaneously also tends to hold multiple emotional realities simultaneously. Feeling deeply isn't the opposite of thinking clearly. For many people, it's an extension of the same capacity. Taken together, these traits form a portrait that looks nothing like the cultural image of intelligence. They don't look like effortless confidence or rapid-fire answers. They look like someone who thinks too much, notices too much, feels too much, and never quite believes they know enough. For most people who carry this kind of mind, the inner experience isn't I must be gifted. It's something must be slightly wrong with me. That gap between what these traits actually are and how they've been labeled is where a lot of unnecessary suffering quietly lives. Because the mind that overthinks is also the one that catches what others miss. The mind that gets overwhelmed by noise is the one that reads a room in seconds. The mind that doubts itself most is often the one that understands most honestly. Intelligence, in its quietest and most durable form, doesn't announce itself. It doesn't walk into a room demanding recognition. It sits in the corner, noticing everything, saying less than it knows, asking questions that others stopped asking years ago. Real intelligence doesn't perform certainty, it performs curiosity. It lives in the habit of noticing small things and refusing to dismiss them. In the willingness to sit with uncertainty long enough to actually think something through. In the refusal to accept an easy answer when a more honest one might exist just beyond the obvious. So the next time you catch yourself thinking you're not quite smart enough, pause, look at what your mind does when no one is watching. Look at what it notices, what it questions, what it refuses to let go of, that restlessness, that sensitivity. That persistent inner voice you've spent years trying to quiet. It isn't the problem, it never was. It was always the signal. If this way of thinking about the mind resonates with you, consider subscribing. Every week, we explore the psychology of people who process the world differently. The ones doing far more than the world typically gives them credit for.